I'll tell you what the most frightening thing in the world is. It's the folly of the American dream. Welcome to another video that I had planned for September but didn't really get around to it until October. So in the true appropriateness of spoopy season, I will now tell you the most frightening thing in the world, and that is the American dream. And by that I mean, today we were talking about Great Gatsby and some of its retellings. So some background about me and Great Gatsby. I actually never read it in high school. Great Gatsby is one of those quintessential American novels that basically every American kid reads at around at least high school. That's usually the time. But the thing is, I was such an advanced reader that I never read it because I was in the AP classes. So in the AP classes, I read shit like Nathaniel Hawthorne, Scarlet Letter, what else? We read Shakespeare. We read some modern novels as well. The one that sticks out to me is The Roundhouse by Louise Eldritch. Basically, I never got around to reading Great Gatsby in school. But the thing is about Great Gatsby is that it's just so ingrained in the cultural zeitgeist that I know everything about it already. And I also watched, when was it, the 2010 or 2012 movie with Leonardo DiCaprio in it. I watched it, so then it was a pretty good adaptation, so I knew everything already. But I was inspired to make this video for two reasons. One is that I had this video idea where I wanted to basically catch up on my high school reading and read some school required books that I missed out on when I was at school. And then I was also inspired by the release of, as you can see in the background, Self-Made Boys by Anne-Marie McLemore. And so I thought, oh, you know what? Let's make Gatsby its own video, because Gatsby alone, even though it's been analyzed and reanalyzed and like 100 million different ways, it's nice to talk about, especially with the upcoming midterm election. Make sure you check your voter registration and get to the ballot. So I thought, okay, let's take Gatsby out in particular. I still want to do that catch up on required reading video, but I'm going to take Gatsby out, make it its own video, and talk about some books. So I only have 3 books for you today because I want this to be a nice little amuse-bouche, so to speak. So we're going to talk about Gatsby, and we're going to talk about 2 other books. The first book we're going to talk about is, of course, Gatsby. Great Gatsby himself, the big old man, the big guy in the big house across the way where he looks at a green light and wants it. So honestly, I don't really know what I can say other than it was a really good book. Finally reading Gatsby, I wasn't really surprised at anything. Like I said, I've seen the movie. I've seen some literary analysis on it. I know about the whole thing about Nick possibly being gay. And I kind of went into it reading for that. It's like, hey, so where is it? It's in this one little thing in chapter 4? Okay. Even though it was a very short book, I feel like there was just the right amount of words. And that's really weird to say because for such a short book, it gets through the whole plot fairly quickly, but not so quickly that you feel like you're being rushed through it. Everything was given like the care and attention it needed to say what it had to say. The metaphors were, pretty standard. I guess that because that is why Great Gatsby is such a staple of high school required reading in America, is because the literary analysis is fairly, I don't want to say easy, but it's something that everyone can pretty much quickly catch up on and understand. For example, the green light at the end of Daisy's Dog is the metaphor for longing, it's the metaphor for yearning. You have the symbolism of the eyes, Dr. Eckelbert's eyes, that are the eyes of God that witnessed the car accident, and you have the symbol of Jay Gatsby himself. What does he represent in terms of the idea of the American dream? And the idea is that it's unattainable and it perhaps doesn't even exist. And my man F. Scott Fitzgerald knew that shit. So I don't want to get too into Great Gatsby because I'm kind of recovering from a cold, so I don't really have a whole lot of brain power to parse what has already been parsed. So I recommend finding some video essays about Great Gatsby on your own. The Wikipedia article on Great Gatsby itself is also really fascinating because it gives the historical context in which Great Gatsby was published. For example, there is the character of, I think what his name was, Meyer Wolfstein, and how even at the time people were like, hey, he is a gross caricature of Jewish stereotypes. And even F. Scott Fitzgerald was like, oh shit, oh no, I didn't mean that. because he didn't check himself before he wrecked himself and fell into stereotypes when he shouldn't have. And that's a very appropriate lesson from some writers. You can't just take shit and put it in your book. You have to research it. Is this actually a terrible stereotype? Maybe it is. The Wikipedia article also talks a bit about how Daisy is viewed not just in the eyes of her husband Tom and Gatsby themselves, but also in the eyes of the readers. Because the readers can either empathize with Daisy for choosing Tom, or they disagree with her choice not to be with Gatsby. And yet, it is interesting in the sense that the readers has expectations of her, and yet she also herself is a character that hates the pressure of expectation. If you kind of get what I mean, I'm trying to think about how to get through this. It's just interesting that like the way we view women in society, we either treat them as angels or devils. And in the story of Great Gatsby, Daisy herself is the trophy to be won by these men. And yet she makes the decision to choose security over a dream. And our image of her as the reader is also subverted in a way. Anyway, I'm gonna stop before I like knock myself into a thinking coma or something. So, Great Gatsby. What hasn't been said already? That is mostly how I feel about classic books already, is that like they've been parsed for so long by so many people already that like whatever I have to say really just boils down to I get it, I don't get it, I like it or I don't like it. I get it and I do like it, and I do recommend Great Gatsby if you ever get a chance to read it. But the meat of this video isn't about the big man himself. It's about what people have decided to do once the big man said, hey, I'm in the public domain, come at me. The next book on this list is The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nevo. So if you go back into my channel, I have my 2021 anticipated reads video in which I talk about 12 books that I was looking forward to for the year 2021, and The Chosen and the Beautiful was one of them. At the time, I did not know it was a Great Gatsby retelling or reimagining. So that's why I put it off for so long until now, because when I found out it was a Gatsby reimagining, I'm like, I actually never read Great Gatsby, so I'm going to put this off for now. This one was actually not one of my favorite books. So The Chosen and the Beautiful it's a reimagining of Jordan Baker, which we follow her, and she is a Chinese Vietnamese woman living in 20s America after she was taken from her homeland by Eliza Baker, and she becomes their adoptive daughter, just like in real life. I never actually took a sip of this. 1 second. If only this were champagne, but it's like an okay white wine. So in this 1920s America, there is also magic. The magic isn't really explained because this is more of a literary novel, and it shows. So what I was hoping for, maybe I should just go into books less with expectations, because this did not really quite meet them. The original Gatsby book has this almost perfect balance of prose, plot, and pace. Chosen and the Beautiful has prose in which the writing is very beautiful, very detailed, especially in the way it describes magic, the way it describes the fashion, the food, and the atmosphere of Gatsby's parties. But I do not know what the plot is, and the pacing was quite slow. It either sped up a little bit and then just kind of meanders a bit and then picks up again. Can I tell you what the plot of Chosen and Beautiful is? Well, since it is a Gatsby reimagining, it does more or less follow the same story beats as the original Gatsby story, in which Nick moves in. Gatsby is like, hey, can you help me win over your cousin? And Nick says yes, and Jordan is there. In this case, we follow Jordan, and she is put into even the story points in which she wasn't in the original book. But even so, she is the observer. She's just there to observe and not really change the story in a significant way. And what I was hoping for by changing Jordan to be an Asian woman, considering that Gatsby was made in its context, what I was hoping for was to address Jordan Baker's new identity as an Asian woman living in America at a time where Asian minorities and generally people of color were treated very badly. Even today, they're still treated very badly, so for what I was hoping for was some acknowledgement of like racism, because the context in which Chosen and the Beautiful was written, we had the 2020 pandemic, we had the rise of Asian hate crimes, we had Stop Asian Hate. So I was hoping for some of that to come into the plot, and we didn't really get any of that. We did get this simmering background thing called the Manchester Act, which was basically like Chinese exclusion and exclude everyone else act part 2. But Jordan is like, well, I'm leaving anyway, so whatever. And then it's like, because she's rich, so she has the privilege of leaving. Even though the writing was beautiful, it just lost me because I did not understand the plot. Spoilers ahead. Like I said, I can't even picture the plot, but like, so there's paper magic here and there's demons. So paper magic can create doppelgangers to more or less function almost as well as a real human being. For example, Jordan makes a copy of Daisy to play as her during her engagement party because she's so bereft by Gatsby's letter. But the thing is that, like, of course, like, these beings are at the end of the day made of paper, so they can be easily destroyed. But it turns out that the Nick we've been seeing the entire time, apparently, in Chosen the Beautiful was a Nick made of paper, because the original Nick died in World War I. And his family, like, I guess, commissioned a paper Nick. And then it's later revealed that Gatsby made a deal with the devil? No, he made a deal with hell. Hell. There's no devil, there's just hell. And there's demons, but there's no devil, there's just hell. And I guess that's a thing. So he made a deal with the devil. I can keep saying deal with the devil, it's deal with hell. He made a deal with hell to win Daisy over, but it doesn't work. At the end of the day, she's not won over. As the end in the original book, she stays with Tom. I guess, like, you can find the metaphors in there if you reach for it. Like, oh, attaining the American dream is perhaps akin to making a deal with hell and selling your soul. But I mean, Gatsby is still fucking Nick on the side. And Nick is still in love with Gatsby. But, like, was Nick in love with Gatsby before he died and that went into his paper copy, or was the paper copy in love with Gatsby? I didn't understand that. So at the end of the day, The Chosen and the Beautiful was just like spun sugar. Like, it was great, but there wasn't a lot of substance in my opinion. And I was just kind of slogging through it because, like, while beautiful writing is great, having too much is like, okay girl, we get it. I'm not saying girl as in like the author, I'm just saying girl in general. Okay, girl, we get it. That's just my opinion on Chosen and the Beautiful. So, but what we're here for is what came out just a while ago. By a while ago, I think it was last month, and that is Self-Made Boys by Anna Marie McLemore. McLemore. Yes, I think it's McLemore, and please don't say I make it sound like Macklemore. So Self-Made Boys is another reimagining of Great Gatsby. In this case, Jay Gatsby and Nick Carraway are both trans, and Nick Caraveo and his cousin Daisy Fabrega are both Latino, or Latinx, because please let me know. I've been told that Latinx is offensive now. Anyway, so like Chosen of the Beautiful, this reimagining also more or less follows the same story beats as the original Gatsby, in which Nick comes to New York to start a job on Wall Street or whatever street. He lives next door to Jay Gatsby. Jay Gatsby is like, hey bro, I understand you. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, I get it. And he's like, oh my god, you get it. And he's like, hey, so like I've been in love with your cousin since I faked my age to go into the war, because they're all teenagers now, so they have to do some retroactive like backstory editing. And Nick is like, okay, great, you're my bro, like I get it. I keep saying bro, they're not using bro, I'm just paraphrasing. Tom is the boyfriend now who's like, people of color are gonna kill us all and take our jobs. And everyone's like, oh, haha, Tom, you're so funny. Anyway, can I please get your money and security? Because Daisy here now is attempting to white pass. And so because of that, there's now a rift forming between Nick, who can't really pass as white at all because his skin is more brown. So this causes a rift between him and Daisy, and Jordan is here as well. And spoiler alert, she also reveals herself to be a much better white passing Latina. So what I like more about Self-Made Boys, even though it's very much typical YA protagonists kind of feel, the writing is still very beautiful. Anna Marie McLemore's books, I've only ever read When the Moon Was Ours. And so I know that they have this very beautiful writing style. And in this one, they really, I think, kept it in check in favor of the plot, which is something that Chosen and Beautiful, in my opinion, did not accomplish. Because here, it also has something to say. And it says it very clearly. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to hide of yourself in order to achieve the American dream? So for example, Jay, spoiler alert, he's not necessarily in love romantically with Daisy, but he was hoping to achieve a lavender marriage with her. So a lavender marriage, for those of you who don't know, why don't you know? A lavender marriage is when a queer man and a queer woman usually get married and basically pass off as straight by being married to each other while agreeing to see their romantic partners on the side. And so Jay, he's actually a gay man. And so he was like, oh, I was hoping to achieve a lavender marriage with Daisy because she knows I'm trans and we get along. And, you and Jordan were getting along together. So I was hoping we could have an arrangement, so to speak. Because then it's revealed later that Daisy and Jordan are in love with each other. And then it was poor Nick who was I was stewing in my romantic feelings for Gatsby, thinking I could not be gay and trans at the same time when you guys were trying to plan a lavender marriage without me. Anyway, where was I going with this? So what it has to say with Gatsby trying to achieve a lavender marriage and then also having Daisy be white passing, they were going through lengths to hide themselves, to pass off in respectable American society the best they can in order to achieve the American dream, which is safety and security and survival. But it comes with a cost. They have to hide themselves. They have to endure bullshit like Tom, who's white supremacist basically, and was all these people of color, all these brown people and all these black people are coming to steal our jobs. And poor Nick is I hate it here. And he's extra mad because his own cousin, who is a white passing Latino woman, can't stand up for him. And that's so hurtful because absolutely, this has absolutely happened in real life. And so what I admire about Self-Made Boys, especially, this is spoilers for the end, is that, so it asks the question, what are you willing to give up in order to achieve the American dream? And then Self-Made Boys decides, you know what, fuck it. Nothing is worth giving up for the idea of the American dream. So the ending is that they fake Gatsby's death and they all run off together. And it's that's so ideal. And I love that because I feel especially with things that are historically set, for example, a big example that I'm thinking about right now is Banana Fish, is that usually it feels nowadays if it's set, well, nowadays, no, Banana Fish was written in the 90s. But basically, you know what I'm saying is that I usually feel that whenever something is both historical and queer, it usually has a bad ending. And that's what I was kind of expecting for this, where it's it either ends with everybody in disappointment but alive, or it ends with disappointment and everyone's dead, which is perhaps not the mindset I should be going into with my queer novels, but still. So what I admire is that it sets out to answer its own question, and that's what makes the plot very contained and also set, very complete, perhaps is the right word. Of course, it's not a perfect book. I'm making it seem like it's the best Gatsby reimagining in the world. There's so many others out there, and some that are even still upcoming. And for example, in some things that I think Self-Made Boys could do better is the romance. For example, I did not get that Daisy and Jordan were pining. I don't know if they were even an item during the story. They were revealed to, Daisy really confesses to Jordan at the end, and I'm okay, but where is this coming from? Because no doubt Daisy's probably had to repress those feelings in order to try and get in with Tom. So the romance it's there. I just wish there was more of it. but it is a fairly short book. Like, for example, there's a scene that I like, and I think this is the thing that, like, YA and maybe just romance in general needs more of is moments. Because, like, when I think of some, like, romance novels or even romantic subplots, it really just kind of slides into the romance pretty fast. Of course, this can work depending on what kind of romance you're going for, but I feel like a romance plot or subplot that feels very organic to me is when you have a lot of moments together. So for example, in Self-Made Boys, there's just a scene where they're making grapefruit juice. Jay is teaching Nick how to fit in more with high class society by using, oh, instead of this word, use this word. He's kind of quizzing him about it, and they're just making, and Jay is just making grapefruit juice, and Nick is watching how, like, his sleeves are rolled up and he's like making the grapefruit juice, and his arm muscle is like, oh, he's like, oh, well, he could have asked a servant to make grapefruit juice, but he's making it himself for us. I'm like, that's a really nice moment. It's just, even if it doesn't explicitly further the romantic connection, the fact that it's there and the fact that it's like a moment that's like just kind of domestic and it connects them, that's really nice. And I wish there was more of that here, because other than that, I do feel like their romance progressed fairly fast. And like I said before, I didn't really pick up on Daisy and Jordan's romance, but granted, you know, a lot of like female friend like romances tend to look like friendships on the outside, so like maybe it is a me thing, but even still. So how does this all connect? Where do we all go from here? Well, like I said, the scariest thing in the world is the American dream, and even 100 years later, we're still talking about it. And what's scary is that some people still believe it's achievable, especially for immigrant families, such as my mother, for example, still believes in the American dream in a way. Unfortunately, she really likes Elon Musk. Unfortunately, she really likes him. And I'm like, girl, please pick a better white guy to like. And I think that's why Great Gatsby is still so relevant today, is because so many people believe it. And so many people are trying to achieve it. And yet we still have to remind ourselves in the society and the way that we've built it is just not achievable, especially for people with low socioeconomic status, people usually from immigrant families, people who are queer, people who are disabled, people of different religions. For example, in Self-Made Boys, they changed Meyer Wolfsheim to a Jewish woman who's much more proud and open about being Jewish and a lesbian. Because, you know, at the end of the day, everybody was always here. We were always here. And so exploring the stories of how marginalized people used to live, I think, is very important. And I wish all of them had a happy ending just as Self-Made Boys did. So anyway, just some food for thought. I'm gonna end it here, because I told myself I'll only cap my raw footage for about a half hour, and now it's coming up to 37 minutes. Because the thing is that like my back really hurts when I sit in my computer for too long doing like having a very specific like stance. So like I have to stay still and just do all my editing, and it's like now my back hurts and then I have to take a break. So anyway, like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. No. Capitalism is a sham, and we should all do our best to dismantle the system that oppresses us. And yeah, you know what? Like this video because I'm a selfish bitch. Anyway, I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of my rather cloudy day. I'm gonna figure out how to work this ring light, and I'm gonna drink this okay white wine that I bought this really pretty coupe glass for $2 at the thrift store. Comment below on what your favorite Gatsby reimagining is, or maybe if you disagree with me, you can shout it into the void, and the void will shout F you. Thank you for tuning in. Kiss your fandom friends goodnight, and I'll see you in the next video.